Inside the brutal mind of Pablo Escobar. This man needs no introduction. A ruthless being who ruled the world of cocaine. A leader who led the great Medellin cartel. His fights against the law, politics, rival mafias, and everyone else in the world, are a legend unto themselves. But how did he execute his enemies? In recently released unpublished and classified interviews, the truth is revealed, now translated into several languages. Discover the dark secrets of Pablo Escobar and his way of taking justice against anyone who dares to get in his way. The story of Pablo Escobar begins on the streets of Medellin, Colombia, where he grew up in an environment of extreme poverty and violence. But how did he go from being a poor boy to becoming one of the richest and most powerful men in the world? Through his connections to the world of drug trafficking and violence, Escobar gained power and fame. But what was going through his mind? What was his motivation for committing the heinous crimes for which he is remembered? Criminal psychology experts have analyzed his behavior, and his possible psychological profile is shocking. Do you want to know more? Don't miss a second of this video. Do and forget to subscribe, like and comment on what you think about the historical figure of Pablo Escobar. Let's get started. Escobar declares war on Germany. The drug lord's wife, Victoria Eugenia Henao, along with their 2 children, had fled Colombia due to the death threats they faced from their enemies and government forces. However, his search for safety on German soil was unsuccessful. After spending 24 hours at the airport, the family was denied entry by German border forces and returned to Colombia. But what happened in those 24 hours of waiting in Frankfurt is even more intriguing. At that time, an audio was recorded abroad in which Pablo Escobar is heard threatening the German government with retaliation against German citizens, tourists, companies, and interests in Colombia if his family was rejected. What is even more astonishing is that German officials reportedly concluded that the endangered lives of the Escobar family were a consequence of the drug lord's criminal activities, and therefore it was not his responsibility to protect them. What implications does this have on the figure of Pablo Escobar and his psychological profile? According to a study by the Faculty of Psychology of the López Vallejo University, Escobar was a professional criminal, dedicated to illegal acts and a recidivist. His egocentric personality leaned towards ambition, arrogance, and exhibitionism, which led him to appear in the media as a business figure alongside politicians, seeking notoriety. But his dark psychological profile did not stop there. Social resentment, disloyalty, aggressiveness and violence, absence of feelings of guilt, lies and manipulation, lust for power and revenge, as well as being a calculating person. All this perfectly describes the personality of Escobar, who demonstrated extreme cruelty in his actions. He had no qualms about executing those who got in his way, including innocent children and women, tourists, and German businessmen who were lying in Colombia during those negotiations. He had no mercy for anyone. Conflicts and betrayal with the Cali cartel. According to what is heard in another filtered audio, Pablo Escobar learns that the Black has been looking for him for a long time. He comments that it is the Cali cartel, who wants to expel him from their territory because he is invading the New York beach, which, according to them, has always been theirs. According to what is heard in another filtered audio, Pablo Escobar learns that the Black has been looking for him for a long time. He comments that it is the Cali cartel, who wants to expel him from their territory because he is invading the New York beach, which, according to them, has always been theirs. This news leaves Escobar on his toes, but also shows his arrogance, as he is fearless and willing to do whatever it takes to maintain his power. The conflict between the Medellin cartel, led by Escobar, and the Cali cartel, led by the Rodriguez-Orihuela brothers, reached its peak in the late 1980s. At that time, both cartels controlled most of the drug trafficking. Drugs in Colombia and were in a constant war for control of territories and markets. Each had their own methods and strategies to achieve their goal, but both were equally dangerous and ruthless. In 1988, the Cali cartel attempted to kill Escobar with a car bomb at his luxury apartment in Medellin. The attack failed, but his daughter Manuela was left deaf for life. This only increased Escobar's anger and revenge towards his rivals. In his mind, this meant all-out war, and he was willing to do anything to eliminate his enemies and protect his family. The rivalry between the cartels further intensified when Escobar turned himself in to authorities in 1991, after living as a fugitive for several years. While he was in prison, the Rodriguez-Orihuela brothers and their associates attempted to expand their territory and power. But when Escobar discovered that the Ochoa brothers, his main allies in the Medellin cartel, were collaborating with the Cali cartel, an internal struggle broke out within the Medellin cartel that would end with the death of the Ochoa brothers. In him we can see a personality split in two, where his life as a drug dealer and his life as a family man and benefactor seem to be two opposite poles. It is evident that in his life as a drug trafficker, Escobar demonstrated a ruthless coldness in the management of business, and a total lack of empathy towards the people who were affected by his criminal activity. However, in his family life and in his work as a benefactor, one saw a man devoted and loving to his wife and children, and with a vocation to help the poorest sectors of Medellin. Although his charitable work may have been seen by many as laudable, the truth is that Escobar found in it a way to recruit young people to his cause. In this way, he could use these young people as cheap assassins, in what could be considered an emotional manipulation of the most vulnerable sectors of society. On the other hand, it is interesting to see how Escobar sought to separate his family life from his criminal activity. This led him to want to protect his family from the dangers of his business, and to try to keep them away from any activity that might put them at risk. This duality in his personality shows us a complex man, who seems to be in a constant struggle with himself and his decisions. Furthermore, it is curious to see how the presence of his family could have a transformative effect on his behavior. When Escobar was in moments of great tension, his lieutenants knew that to contain him they had to take his children. In this way, Escobar became another person, and his anger disappeared. This shows us once again how important his family was to him and how their presence could have a positive impact on his behavior. Pablo Escobar's revenge against the Cali cartel reached a critical point after his family was attacked by rivals. This was the spark that ignited the fury of the cocaine king, who was determined to make those responsible pay for what they had done. He tried to be president. Pablo Escobar, the most wanted man in the world, had a clear goal: to become the president, more to achieve his goal. He was willing to pay any price, but corruption in Congress seemed to be increasing every day. Escobar is heard frustrated at having to give politicians more extra collaboration in order to move forward with his presidential ambition. But what price was he willing to pay to achieve his goal? The truth is that he did not last long in the game of politics, since they raised accusations and complaints against him, including him on the list of drug traffickers. Finally, on January 20, 1984, the drug lord announced his retirement from politics. What would have happened if Escobar had achieved his goal? What other measure would he have taken to come to power? Pablo Escobar is one of the best-known criminals in the recent history of Colombia and the entire world. This man has been the subject of numerous psychological studies that seek to understand what motivated him to carry out the violent acts that made him famous. Escobar is considered a sociopath due to his inability to empathize with his victims and his lack of remorse for his actions. Ultimately, the story of Pablo Escobar is a tragedy, a story of how a person can fall into the abyss of depravity and crime without looking back. His life is a reminder that power and wealth do not guarantee happiness, but can lead to an empty existence and a tragic end. Although his story may be fascinating from a historical and psychological point of view, we cannot forget the suffering he caused so many innocent people. It is important to remember that ambition and greed can have terrible consequences, and that we must do everything possible to prevent someone like Escobar from rising to power again. I hope this analysis has been useful and informative. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more interesting content and in-depth analysis. Until next time. Inside the brutal mind of Pablo Escobar. This man needs no introduction. A ruthless being who ruled the world of cocaine. A leader who led the great Medellin cartel. His fights against the law, politics, rival mafias, and everyone else in the world, are a legend unto